Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our global journey to NYU Buenos Aires. My name is Marianne Petit. I am with the Office of Global Programs, and I'm here to introduce Anna Kazumi-Stahl, the director for NYU Buenos Aires. Anna has earned her PhD in comparative literature from UC Berkeley and is a published fiction writer. She has lived in Argentina since 1995, teaching, writing, and translating. Her areas of research relate to Asian diaspora in the Americas. She has published 3 books, Catástrofes Naturales and Flores de un Solo Día, which are fiction works, and Miradas, Literatura Japonesa del Siglo XX, a nonfiction text. Her novel Flores was a finalist for the prestigious Rómulo Gallegos Prize in Latin America. Several of her texts have been published in translation in Europe, the United States, Japan, and Australia. Moreover, she serves on the board of directors of the Fulbright Commission Argentina and is an active member of PEN Argentina. And so I now hand over the program to Anna. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Good evening for some of you, obviously. And thank you very much, Marianne Petit and the team at NYU Global Programs in New York, and of course also at NYU Shanghai. Thank you very much for this invitation to talk about Buenos Aires in Global Journeys. I'm very, very excited to have a wonderful colleague to chat with today, Professor Nicolás Comini from Argentina, who is a specialist in international relations, has worked for many years in academics, but also works in new fields of technology and how they affect international relations and support diplomatic work. Nicolás, good morning here in Buenos Aires. It's very early. Thank you very much for joining us. How are you this morning?
Hi, Anna, and hello, everyone. I'm very excited for being here, and thank you so much for inviting me. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, this is very early in the morning in Buenos Aires, but you know, I'm a baby daughter, Clarita, who is very active from very early, so it's not so early for me, to be honest.
That's good. Yes, I'm glad you're chipper at this time. Now, this is an interesting thing. This has always fascinated me. But did you know that Buenos Aires is the almost exact antipode of Shanghai? Geographically, we are actually the almost opposite points of the world. If you put a thread through the globe from Buenos Aires, it would come out in Shanghai. And it's a very engaging thought. There's a very beautiful artistic documentary that was made about this, full of luscious images showing the difference. And so I thought it might be fun to start with this. Buenos Aires and Shanghai meeting together to talk about the experience of connecting across opposites, engaging across big differences and big distances. And you, Nicolás, being someone who works in international relations, I thought it might be interesting to get your perspective. What is valuable about connecting across big differences, big distances? What makes it work? What makes it worthwhile?
I think it's always an opportunity to learn from each other. But I think that I would divide my answer into different moments. On one side, we can say that we are in the opposite side of the world. So maybe we will understand some things from different, perspectives, concepts, ideas, priorities. Maybe will be different, or maybe we'll think that they are different. But and I'm seeing this in my course currently. Sometimes our similarities are much bigger than what we previously think about this. Usually when you are far away, geographically speaking, we don't understand that we share a lot of common, history, the processes that we face, similar, challenges in the world. So I think this is pretty important to understand, that this is not about differences, but also to understand similarities and common priorities, common interests, and common challenges. So I think that study abroad is a great chance to understand these processes and these ideas.
That's perfect. Thank you. And I know that you are such a motivated educator. I know you love being in the classroom. You love teaching undergrads, students from international backgrounds. We're very lucky to have you. But let me ask you something specific to your field. Since we are talking about global opposites, we're talking about Asia and Latin America. Asia is in the news a lot here lately in Argentina, in Latin America. So maybe I can ask for your expert point of view. What new changes are you seeing lately? Why is Asia so much in the news here in Latin America right now?
Asia has been playing a very active role in Latin America over the last years, over the at least 30 years. And China specifically has been playing a very important role, especially from the beginning of the 2000s, right? China has become a very strategic partner for many Latin American economies, but not only in terms of economy. This started maybe with the relationship became more and more important in the beginning because of trade, and currently this is about like a lot of different dimensions, from cultural dimensions to political to dimensions focused on health, as we are seeing right now in the middle of this pandemic. And the political relationship is getting more and more important in a multilateral level within many multilateral institutions like the WTO, the UN, the G77, or even the G20, where 3 Latin American countries, Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina, are full members. And also in bilateral levels, because again, not only China, but also many Asian countries have been playing a more active role in terms of security, trade, infrastructure, health. So I think this is a great moment to rethink of regional partnership strategies for this region, and especially to give a greater importance to the South-South cooperation in trade, but also in foreign and direct investment, in terms of political and cultural cooperation. And of course, the Asian countries can play an active role in that sense.
Right, good. Well, let me switch focus a little bit and talk about your course, because you teach one of the most popular courses here. Your course almost always has a wait list. People are trying to get their friends into the course, and you're also having success now in the online version as well. So let's talk about that a little bit. So I know that your course has a very specific framing. It's called Inter-American Relations. Can you tell us a little bit about what the focus is in your course?
Yes, well, we focus especially on the US Latin American relationship from the end of the Cold War until these days. And something that is very important for us is to break up stereotypes, to try to problematize concepts that are usually simplified by external perspectives, like populism or democracy, for example, or development. Okay, so what we usually try to do is to try to to try to bring different ideas to any concept, to any process in the region, and to try to avoid US-centric approaches. What we try to always do is to bring dialogue between more US-centric approaches to the region with more centralized visions on the region. And we special focus on regionalism in our course, and we focus on specific institutions, regional institutions like the South American Common Market or the Andean region, or the Pacific Alliance, for instance.
Interesting. All right. Let me say one thing though. Your class, which has so many students in it, you've seen semester after semester for years now how diverse the NYU student population is, how many different backgrounds reach Buenos Aires. What do you think might be some of the best things that your students receive or discover when they come to Buenos Aires, to our place, our site?
That's a very good question, because I usually see one part of their experience in Buenos Aires, but I can say, that's my personal opinion, that language is one of the most important things that they see and they learn and they enjoy most, because, well, Spanish is one of the world's most widely used languages. I think they usually enjoy the cultural codes. It's very nice for me to see how they are progressively involved in some cultural codes in Argentina, like drinking mate, for example, and many other things. When they visit other parts of Argentina, and they brought like local clothes, and this is very nice, and I think that they enjoy the cultural warming, and the open and friendly culture of Argentina, especially in Buenos Aires. And I think that they could create, like, make strong relations with academics, with intellectuals that are also very open, and then in many cases they continue having a relation like later on, when the students come back to their cities. And I think that this is also about the multicultural histories, right? Even when we usually see Latin America as a whole, what they especially see when they come to Buenos Aires is a very diverse and cultural, and social identities, not only within Argentina but within the region.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is definitely one of the more surprising things is, this is a very diverse environment. Buenos Aires has been so impacted by historical immigration and migration. So it gives it a very specific flavor. And I agree, I think intellectuals here are incredibly collaborative. It's very unusual for me, coming from a US background where people are more individualistic, to find intellectuals and artists sharing here their work and their processes is interesting. But let's look specifically a little bit about the question of international relations. You talked about the region. For students who are coming here to look at international relations in the framework of your course, so focused on the Americas, what do you think are the most important things going on right now? What are the key things that students should be looking at and could learn more about from you by being here, studying with you here?
The first thing I would say is that there is a very visible tension between the US agenda and the Latin American agenda. So when we address the hemispherical agenda, we should understand that from a US perspective, there are like a constant in terms of the priorities of the US towards the region, beyond each US administration, which are usually immigration or migration from Latin America to the US, security and trade. This trilemma, these three issues are usually the core of the US agenda towards the region. But from a Latin American perspective, the agenda is much broader, and the agenda is not necessarily focused on trade or immigration or security. Usually we understand from a Latin American perspective that for example, the case of security is more a consequence than, you know, a cause of the Latin American problems. Our problems, our agenda is more focused on, you know, poverty, marginalization, asymmetries in terms of access to health, to security, to education. And sometimes that agenda is in tension in both in a bilateral level, but also in a multilateral level within institutions where the US and the Latin American countries, or some Latin American countries, are usually part of.
Yeah, and I know that your course has specific tools that you plug in to activate the students in relationship to these issues. Even though the students are recently arrived, your course has specific ways of getting them engaged, getting them involved, getting them out there. Can you tell us some examples of how your course activates students to get engaged with international relations in Latin America?
Yes, you know, there are some, we always part from the idea that we are always facing imperfect information, you know, and so it's pretty difficult for us to, like, objectively understand some crisis, like in Venezuela. So we all know that there is a crisis in Venezuela, but maybe our understandings about the sources of that crisis will be different depending on the information that we handle, depending our opinions, personal opinions, ideologies, and interests. So what we usually try to do during my course, during this course, is to try to visit, for example, some, I don't know, we every time we go to, every semester we go to the presidential palace to try to understand the formal vision of the presidential diplomacy in Argentina, but then we go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to try to understand the more traditional perspective of the Argentine foreign policy, sometimes between presidential and the traditional diplomacy. There are also sometimes there are also some tensions, but what we also try to do is to bring different opinions. In some cases, like in the case of Venezuela, we have invited, for example, people who are in favor of the current government and people who are absolutely against. One of the key results is that we usually understand that it's always difficult to take a very strong position, because complexities are always part of social sciences and, of course, part of international relations. And when we are dealing with polarized processes, we should always try to understand all voices.
Words of wisdom, very, very important in more than one field. Let me ask you a different question. What about all these innovations with new technology, social media, everything that's happening with that? How does that fit into what you're describing here, more infrastructural ways of dealing with international relations? Now there's all this new technology.
On one side, this is creating a lot of opportunities because, for example, currently I'm teaching a course with all Shanghai students, so it's absolutely fantastic. They are in Shanghai, I'm in Buenos Aires, and we met every Tuesday and Thursday. So this is amazing, an amazing opportunity. And on the other side, professors from other countries in Latin America are being part of our course as, you know, guest speakers. This semester we are inviting professors from Chile, from Mexico, from Brazil, from Colombia, and of course this brings a lot of opportunities that didn't happen previously, because it's almost impossible for us to invite people from other countries to participate in the course just for one class. So I think this is amazing, and of course this brings a lot of opportunity also for students to connect with these professors that are, you know, across Latin America. But of course, on the other side, in a broader perspective, technology is very important because it's amplifying the channels for new actors to be part of the political discussions. This brought the possibility to, to include new topics on the hemispherical agenda or the regional or the local agenda, and there are a lot of problems, a lot of challenges, of course, because on the other side, as at the same time that you are creating opportunities for new actors for being part of the discussions, you are, of course, it's currently very difficult to define what is actually true, what is actually false. So what we are facing right now is that we are always challenging what media outlets or what social media is telling us that something is happening in a positive or in a negative way. And of course, this is also bringing a lot of other problems, like this is a channel for criminality to spread across the region, and this is impacting in many countries as well. So technology has always this dilemma, brings always this dilemma. It's positive on one side, negative on the other one. But for us in this course, it gives us a lot of opportunities to discuss about things that are very complicated.
So it's kind of like building your fact-checking
DNA.
Right.
Right.
Great. So I know that you obviously usually you are working with scholars and people in the field of diplomacy and foreign relations. And I know also that you have had a lot of experience in Argentine universities as a chair of the International Relations Department at undergrad and grad level. So I'm always curious, you really, really seem to enjoy when you come to NYU Buenos Aires. We have undergraduate students. We're a small, a little community in the middle of this big city, and you always arrive with a smile. You seem to enjoy your time with us. Can I ask you why? What are the things that you enjoy the most coming away from your world of really big connections to our world? What do you enjoy about teaching international students with us?
Everything, everything. I enjoy everything, but I enjoy diversity as one of the, if I would say what you enjoy most, I mean, diversity is the most important factor for me. Diversity in any sense. I mean, every course is different. Diversity in terms of backgrounds, in terms of perspectives, in terms of, in terms of languages, in terms of approaches. So for me, it's that this is always a two-way learning path. I'm constantly learning, and as diversity is so incredible, also concepts are always in tension, because depending on the background of students, their perspective about some concepts, about some processes will be always different. So for me, it's a constant challenge, because I'm always sometimes I don't, I'm gonna be absolutely honest, but sometimes I don't know what to expect during some discussions. This is not something that I can control sometimes. So this is fantastic for me, because it's always bringing me some critical, perspectives that are new.
Well, that's real, because I know your course and you as a facilitator of discussions, You have a really positive reputation for being able to create a space of constructive debate, of really clarifying disagreement, clarifying contrast. So I admire that, and I know that many of your colleagues here admire that as well. I wonder how you do that. I know that you use role play. You try to make sure that students practice other perspectives that are not their own. So it's an interesting balance, right, of students being able to have and show their opinions, but also practice the perspective of an opposite point of view, right? You do that on purpose?
Yes,
Part of
yes,
your
and
plan.
yes. Well, we address that methodological and pedagogical approach from different dimensions. On one side, we do this role play that you mentioned. We change the role play depending on the moment. Currently, we are doing a role playing on the G20, the group of 20 countries that where Mexico, Argentina, and Brazil are part of, as I mentioned previously. And the idea is that students have to represent the leaders of these countries, and they have to defend their positions on like key topics, even when they don't agree with the position of those leaders and those countries. So it's an interesting exercise to try to understand the other's positions on specific issues. So these students have to understand the cultural history of that country, the political history of that country, the interest of the specific government at that moment, because it's different if you are maybe like in 2020 or in 2018, because in some cases, leaders are different as well. So that's part of the way that we usually face this kind of exercises, but they also do like specific research on topics that are like part of their interest, because during the course we focus on a lot of issues, but I think it's pretty important to always be flexible on in terms of what actually students like to research on. We open the course for every student to focus on those topics that students are interested in, and that could range from regional integration to, I don't know, to specifically some specific topics like femicides in South America, or violence, depending on the interest on the interest of each student.
Thanks. This is really interesting. I also know another thing that I hear a lot about your course from students is some of the high-powered visits, the opportunity to get to go meet someone who has been an ambassador in a difficult international relations moment. Can you give us an example or two? What have been some of the most exciting visits that you've allowed students to experience?
Well, beyond as I mentioned previously, that we usually visit the presidential palace and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where usually government officials from a high level, government officials usually bring some topics and ideas about Argentine foreign policy. But for example, we have invited like last semester, for example, one person that was part of the Secretariat of Strategic Affairs of Argentina, which is during Macri's administration, and he was the point of contact of Argentina on the G20, the organization of the G20 in Buenos Aires. So, and he participated, for example, in the bilateral meeting between President Macri and Xi Jinping, or President Macri and President Trump. So students and I could, see how difficult was that process from like from an insider, from someone that was part of the decision-making process and someone who was there in those meetings. So it was amazing for everyone.
Yeah, fantastic. That's like priceless. Like how many people can have that bird's eye point of view, be inside the room? I know that you also have brought amazing people to our academic center. I think you brought the former ambassador to England, the former ambassador to Venezuela, the former foreign minister also you brought to our location. Yes. To meet with students. How do you make these invitations? How do you get people of such a high profile to come to speak to undergrad students?
There's, I mean, it depends on the person, but I think NYU and NYU Buenos Aires is always a very interesting place for them, and it's always interesting for them to talk with students from abroad, from a top level university like NYU. And so this is not necessarily because I can establish a good relationship with them, but also because NYU is a fantastic place to get open discussions and respectful discussions, and to discuss about different opinions on critical topics. So that I think that's why everyone feels comfortable at NYU Buenos Aires. They can bring their opinions, and even when the others don't agree with them, and this is a core part of our course. But I think, I don't know, Anna, you have this broader perspective about NYU Buenos Aires, but I think I see this is part of the NYU Buenos Aires culture.
Yes, it is true. It is true. NYU has a very strong reputation here. So we have been able to host a number of very interesting public figures. But the key here also is our faculty, the professors like yourself, who are very established in their fields and also very generous. What you mentioned earlier about intellectuals in this culture being very open. Like you, other colleagues who teach our courses at NYU Buenos Aires are very open about their networks and bring amazing public officials like you, or amazing artists in the humanities into the classroom. So even though NYU Buenos Aires is a fairly small program, it's almost like very specialized and tailor-made, because the lecturers like yourself bring their network resources into the classroom, or take the students out into the larger world, into the foreign ministry, into the presidential palace, into the curatorial or even artist workshop, into the studio where a musician may be recording. It's an exciting place to be able to work, because there's so much kind of inside access. I know that also a number of the students, a big number of our students, like 30–40% of our students, do internships or semester-long volunteering while they're in Buenos Aires. And in many cases also, the students are guided by what they're learning from their professors. So I know that you, for example, have had students who have been in think tanks locally, doing 10 hours of work per week in a think tank. I know that not that long ago, you had a student who was in a think tank called CPEC, right, which is a very high profile one. CPEC, I think, works on public policy, right? And that's their area. So how did that experience, for example, of a student being in a public policy think tank intersect with your course? Do you remember this case? Can you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think in that case, it was amazing because CPEC was a co-chair of the T20, which is the think tank 20, one of the engagement groups within the G20. So for this student was an amazing coincidence because the G20 was, you know, in Buenos Aires. The CPEC was a co-chair of the G20. We were discussing about the G20 in this role playing. And that was an amazing coincidence and brought a lot of, you know, insights and inputs for the role playing on one side, and on the other side it was amazing because we are during this course, my course, our course, you know, we are always trying to connect foreign policy with domestic policies, like with domestic public policy. And CPEC is one of the most important think tanks on public policy in Latin America. So we could play connecting the issues that this person was working on in CPEC with our course agenda, with some topics that we were addressing during the course. So it was a very important interconnection. I don't know, and I remember that, but maybe you have other examples that, because again you have the broader perspective about the site.
Sure. I mean, we have students like that young man. He was very involved in a think tank, so that was a very sophisticated internship experience, a very academic and intellectual one. We also have students who have been in non-governmental organizations that are more community oriented. So you mentioned earlier that in your course, from a Latin American perspective, there are regional issues that are very, very high priority, like poverty and health and education. And it's almost like the array, the spectrum of internship possibilities here covers those priority issues because the community needs help on certain things. So we have a number of students who are involved in public health efforts. Some of them are public health campaigns, so helping people learn how to access resources, and others are more academic, involved in epidemiological research and things like that. Then in education, we also have students who are maybe very focused on specific communities that have needs. Young kids in under-resourced neighborhoods who are learning how to read and write, who are learning basic skills, but also people who are involved in very large dimensions of creating more engagement internationally for education and tech skills. So it's a spectrum, and I'm really enjoying how it connects students with the community for real. So I'm hearing that we have a question. We'd love to receive the question.
Can you please talk about how inter-American relations have changed in the pandemic, and might there be any long-lasting changes?
A very interesting question. Yes, I think the agenda I mean, didn't change, but some problems has been amplified. You know, poverty has been amplified, the gap in terms of gender equality has increased. Women were at the front of this pandemic. So what we are seeing is that the gap is even bigger than previously. We have also seen that domestic violence has increased in many Latin American countries, and the economic problems are even more complex in several countries. So I think the agenda is currently, I would say that something that has changed, not necessarily in a radical way, but is being part of the tension between the US and some Latin American countries, is the geopolitical run around vaccination, about vaccines. So Russia, China, the US, and some European countries are in the middle of this vaccination process in Latin America, and Latin American countries are adopting different positions around vaccination. And in the case of vaccination and vaccines coming from China and Russia, in many Latin American countries that situation has created some tensions with the US and some European countries. I think there are other questions, right? I don't know.
What advice would you give to students who maybe haven't studied Latin American relations and want to learn more?
I would say that I would recommend some readings. Everyone can reach out to me directly, and I will recommend people some readings. I would say that I would start from like a Latin American approach. There are many books about Latin America and Latin American history, and then what they will see is that Latin America is such diverse region that is very difficult, to understand Latin America as a whole. But I for sure, I'm absolutely able always to recommend some specific readings for everyone that is who are interested in Latin American politics, for sure.
So I know that also your students participate in your course in individual research projects. Can you give us some examples of research that you have found is particularly interesting for the students? The students seem to choose this topic or this aspect when they get to the point of doing their research project in your course?
Currently, one student is analyzing, for example, the similarities and the differences between the South American Common Market, Mercosur, and the Asian Pacific market, the ASEAN. So this is super interesting, because what she's looking at is at the differences, but also at the similarities. And there are so many similarities in terms of agenda, in terms of interest, in terms of challenges. So that's a very interesting topic. And another student is focused on, for example, on the peace negotiation process in Colombia. Colombia has dealt with a very complex civil and military crisis from the 60s, and is currently in a new stage of that process, and she's dipping doing a deep dive on that process. So these are two interesting projects, but there are many, you know.
Yeah, of course. And I know that you often allow your students to choose fairly freely their topic, but then you help them very much to structure the research appropriately, to have the right sources and everything. I think that's fantastic. And there seems to be a lot available in English. Another question I have, I'm often curious about this. I noticed that every semester, you seem to have someone come from a defense department or something specifically related to the ministries of defense or the Secretariat of Defense, either Argentina or from other places. And I'm curious why you think that is such an important dimension, given that we are in times of peace. What is so strategic about the work of a ministry or Secretariat of Defense during peacetime?
Latin American countries, after the last democratic processes and transitions, have used the military forces to address different topics. That was pretty affected by the nature of the democratic transition. But many Latin American countries are using or want to use the military forces, for example, to address drug trafficking, illegal drug trafficking across the region. And part of our discussions is how useful is that strategy on the war on drugs. How useful is to use the military force to defeat drug trafficking. So during our course, we discuss on one side the more military oriented approach, where usually understand that the military forces are useful to defeat drug trafficking, and also we discuss about like other paradigms or approaches focus on regulation and legalization of some specific drugs, and we are always trying to contrast both perspectives, the military perspective and the broader perspective focus on harm reduction and regulation of drugs, because what we are seeing in countries like Mexico, Brazil, or Colombia is that the use of military force to defeat drug trafficking usually brought a lot of violence, a lot of false positives, a lot of innocent people dying, and less results. Colombia still being the #1 cocaine producer in the world. So maybe like new approaches are needed in the discussion.
Right. I see how your course works to help students to think about other solutions, alternative ways to deal with the problem. And it's inspiring to imagine that you're working with young people today, but tomorrow they may be future leaders or be able to influence policy and lives. I thank you very, very much for your time this morning. This has been a wonderful opportunity to be able to sit down and talk in a more focused way with you. I thank you because over time, your students have always had such positive experiences to share from your class. And thank you very much for the time today and in general with sharing your network and your knowledge. Yes, we hope that NYU Shanghai students will be interested and stay in touch. Thank you very much, colleagues in NYU Shanghai and colleagues in NYU New York. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. This was absolutely wonderful. Thank you both.
Thank you.
We're just going to close with the slideshow about Buenos Aires that we began with. Thank you so much.